You're listening to the Career Jump Podcast. Insights, interviews, and success stories to inspire and give you the edge when you make your next career jump. Hosted by your career concierge, Andrew MacAskill.
Hello, welcome back to the Executive Career Jump Podcast. I'm your host and career concierge, Andrew MacAskill, and I'm very excited today because we've got Diana Wu David with us. How are you doing, Diana?
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Andrew. Great to be here.
No, it's really, really good to have you here. As we're going to get into, I think what you represent and the topics that you're talking about have never been more important. So I'm really excited for the conversation today. Just to frame that conversation and give us some context, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and the type of work that you get involved with, please?
Absolutely. So I'm based in Hong Kong and I've been here 20 years. So I sometimes like to tell people I'm from the future because depending on where you sit, aside from Australia, they're ahead of me. I'm, 12, 15 hours ahead of the US and just a bit ahead of the UK. So I came here from the United States. I did my MBA at Columbia Business School, went into consulting, very, career track, linear, get the good grades, go to the good school, go to the good consulting firm. And then I was so bored. So I applied for a grant to come to Asia, a very prestigious grant, happened to get it and came here 20 years ago. And then spent that time doing media. Most of my career has been in tech, media, and telecom, basically harnessing disruption or navigating disruption for my clients. So I've been in large companies. My last employer, who I still work with, the Financial Times, and also small shops that were startups and even venture capital investing in startups.
Love it. No, thanks for sharing that. So how did you get the courage to break out of the traditional career route that you were on? I'm interested to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I had been at Financial Times as an executive for, 10 years. And I was supposed to be able to figure out what was next and what kind of things we might invest in or how we took our investments. I was sort of corporate innovation, corporate development, internal entrepreneur. And I'd just been doing it for a long time. And I remember really this one September budgeting season where, you put your spreadsheets in and which resources and what country across Asia. And I was like, what if I spent all this time and effort and applied it to my own actual life? And suddenly I thought, wow, I might have a really good life. I spent, so much time trying to make my targets, smash my targets, align the compensation plan. And so I just decided to have a chat with, my boss at the time and said, I think I might need to do something else. And they were amazing and, tried to find something else for me to do. But I'd gotten it into my head that life is short and I wanted to try to do a lot of other things. So I still am head of faculty at the board director program that I started up in Asia. And so much of what's come after has been inspired by the group of people, the hundreds of people that have been my students. They're all sort of super senior, super successful CEOs and partners, but kind of talking to them has inspired me to spend way more time really in a portfolio career on sitting on boards, writing future-proof, reinventing work in the age of acceleration, teaching at the MBA level, and then even launching my own courses under Future Proof and trying to create a community and creating my own future of work, really.
I love that. I love the fact that you got to the point where you were able to give yourself permission to go and do that. I think if you look at the statistics, a lot of people aren't fulfilled by what they're doing, but for whatever reason, there's something stopping them feeling like they can give themselves the permission to go and seek something that might work better for them. What do you think holds people back in that regard, Diana? What do you think stopping people getting that?
I was so fascinated because I work with so many successful people, and oftentimes it's not money that's holding them back because they have made money. And what I found was a fear of really kind of giving up the good stuff you have. If you are at a certain level, you're looking down almost like this chasm below thinking, I'm a partner at a law firm. What am I, crazy? Like, maybe I'm not happy, but I have a lot of status. I have, I'm getting paid well. And so I think it's really difficult. There's that, where do I start? How do I make those stepping stones to whatever's next, rather than feel like I have to make a running jump to like jump over this chasm in the earth that I'm sure I won't be able to make. And so part of my work has been dedicated to giving people the simple stepping stones to whatever is next. And some of that is as simple as, how do I introduce myself when I'm no longer Bob from accounting, or I'm no longer Diana from Financial Times, super fabulous brand that everybody knows. And so I think it's fear, and it's always easier to do what other people tell you is going to work than to dig deep to figure it out yourself.
Yeah, well, I think that's very insightful. I like this idea as well of decoupling your identity from your profession, because they're not necessarily the same thing.
Well, no, they used to be more. And one of the things that I think is important for people to understand is that the risk of being in one company and one job or one sort of mindset is increasing. So there are statistics that show that the company lifespan is decreasing. For S&P 500, it's in 2030 predicted to be 12 years. And our lifespans are increasing. So we're just not possible for us to be, in one career at one company, et cetera. So it's really important for us to take more agency over our own journey. And one of the folks who is head of International Bank of Settlements, he said, I get what you're doing. He's in our Future Proof course. He said, you're trying to get people to go from career mindset to a value proposition mindset. And it really is that idea of like, and your value changes in different contexts and different environments and in different, places. So you really have to think about, what is it about me that I can bring together? What's the kaleidoscope of skills and capabilities, and frankly, even character and personality that I can bring together, and what value can I add in, the next circumstance?
Yeah, cracking. And working back from that vision and filling the gaps either with education or mentoring or coaching or whatever it might be to bring that to life, right? And constantly reviewing it. I just don't think people think in that way, particularly in the UK. I just don't think people think in that way about their careers in the way that they maybe do about their financial planning or even their health and, their personal well-being. I don't think people are mapping out their careers.
What they're going to watch next on Netflix.
Well, yeah, right.
I'm pretty sure I spend more time thinking with my kids about what I'm going to watch next on Netflix sometimes. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. We're not trained to do that. We're trained to follow the path. And so I understand too, from all the work I've done with companies and with people, that the idea of perpetual beta, like that we're always under development, can feel exhausting to people. And so that, I think, is another fear, like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to arrive. And you can see in the pandemic and with all the talk about always on, that we do have to learn and upskill, but then also just take breaks. We're sort of masters of our own trajectory and the sort of hills and valleys. But I found when I left FT, which was so hard because I loved my colleagues, I love the brand, I love the company, I found that it was so easy to continue on with multiple projects. We were still having weekly meetings, we had shared calendars, and I thought, wow, why didn't I do this before? I didn't grow up in an era of work from home. So I just thought, if I had known this, it would have been this easy to have many different jobs, really, a portfolio, then I would have done it sooner.
Yeah. So we're getting a lot of people come to us and ask about transitioning to a more portfolio style career, and often a lot earlier than that would have been the traditional choice, right? Because it used to be, you're part something you maybe did later on in your career. As at the twilight of your career, you might tend to take on this portfolio approach. Whereas we're seeing people, some people leaving college and uni and almost going straight into a portfolio style way of working from day one. As somebody who's made that transition, what are the pros and cons of working in a portfolio way in your view?
Well, you're right. And I heard you say that for your other podcast on women on boards, that there are people going earlier and earlier into this new way of work. And I really believe that that is the future of work, that we come together around a task or a project, we build fast trust, we get the things done, and then we may disband. And a lot of those people that we've worked with on these projects become part of this horizontal network where we have professional loyalty to our horizontal network as opposed to the hierarchy of the corporate ladder. And so the portfolio career that I have, number one, I said I didn't go into a portfolio career. And so for anybody there who's thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to do it? I love the idea of a sabbatical, 3 months or a year. And so for me, I said, this is my 1-year sabbatical. And I told my husband that this was basically my midlife crisis. And some people get to have Ferraris, and I was having a sabbatical.
Love it.
And I was like, it'll be less expensive in the long run. And so that space and time to reflect is really what that gives you. And once I did that, and once I tried a bunch of things that I thought I might like and found that, I kind of like scratched that itch and went on, I settled on a few that I knew could be a combination of stable. So some of my work is annual contract, it renews all the time. And most importantly, it's something I know how to do. So I don't have to learn a lot. And then the other aspects, which is what I love about having portfolio, is they're completely new. I love doing things that I've never done before. And it's hard to convince your boss in a big company like, hey, I'm awful at this. I don't know what I'm doing. Will you pay me to learn? And so I get to do that with my own sort of company where if I want to write a book and I've never written a book, then I decide that I can spend a certain amount of time doing that. So what I've found really interesting is that the money is always less stable than maybe a corporate paycheck. And that is a psychological thing that a lot of people that I know have said, like, okay, you really have to be more comfortable with potential financial insecurity, but you have more control over it because it's your hustle and, that ultimately brings in the bacon, as they say in the US. I don't know
That works.
If that's a really global way to say it. But the thing that really I never expected is that idea that I would need to have multiple things, that I would have to have some things that I just knew how to do really well to balance out the things that I didn't. And that I would also have to find collaborators of different types to work on projects with, because I really found very quickly what I wasn't good at. It was sort of like Warren Buffett's, when the tide goes out, who's swimming naked. It's like when you go off and do things on your own, you realize all the things that you thought you probably were okay at, but actually, you had a teammate or other admin or finance department to do.
Yeah, well, that's very true. I've by accident found myself in the portfolio world as well. And the thing I most like about it is that you're basically playing to your strengths the whole time. So I was an MD for a couple of businesses prior, and I felt very exposed for my weaknesses in that scenario and spent a lot of time trying to work on my weaknesses whilst I was, you're kind of trying to build the parachute on the way down after you've already jumped in that kind of role, right? So that's where we were. Whereas I feel like in the portfolio side, you can go, right, what is the superpower? Where are my passions, the ikigai, or whatever you look at in order to find that? And then right now, how do I maximize the amount of time I'm doing that thing that I love and that I'm good at and that drives value in the world across a number of different channels? You just feel like you're playing to your strengths. That's the best thing about it, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that even in a corporate role, people, should think about doing that. But I have a decision-making criteria for the projects I take on, et cetera. And a lot of it is this something that only I can do? I mean, that sounds arrogant, but really, like, is this something that, 6,000 other people could just rock up and do as well? Because if it isn't, then I don't have any differentiation. And, I really want to find the things that stretch me, that play to my strengths, but also are maybe a little bit scary. And to be able to put as much of that into my life as possible is, to me, like, heaven on earth. It's like playing all the time. But that was the surprising thing, is that I found that at some point last year or the year before, I just found that every single thing I did was new. And I was like, enough with this. I do not want to learn. And I love learning. It's like top value and curiosity. But I was like, I don't want to learn anything new. I can't take it anymore. Please let me just do all the things that I basically quit, when a corporate that I felt like I could do with my eyes closed. And then I realized that I needed to sort of balance it quite a bit. I was on a robotics education board, and there was all these challenges, and I was like, ugh. So that's something, and time itself, because you always think that, for instance, in board work, you always think, oh, well, if all three of these boards take 1/3 of my time, then that's great. And then something like COVID happens and you're like working, 300% trying to deal with crises. So a bit of a buffer is very useful.
No, good watch out there. It's rarely the 2 hours a month that you sign up for in reality. So very good watch out there.
Hey everybody, it's Andrew here. Just wanted to very briefly interrupt this podcast episode to tell you a little bit more about our Career Jump Club. So our Career Jump Club was created to help job seekers understand what they want and how to get it, right? So becoming a club member is a great move if you're looking to get the clarity and confidence in order to secure your next role. With the membership, you get a number of different things. So first thing you get is access to our online platform, which has over 30 videos, 40, 50 different templates, workbooks, and it takes you through everything from sort of understanding what you want to how to position your CV and LinkedIn, how to interview, how to close offers and negotiate better salaries, a full end-to-end job search course effectively for senior leaders. So you get that, you get a fortnightly group coaching call, which is with me and with the other members, where we bounce around best practice, share slide decks, share techniques, and share the latest data on what's working for people. And you get to, most importantly, become part of our closed LinkedIn group and our closed community. And in there is where the magic often happens, because you get people referring each other into opportunity, supporting each other, and just sharing. And that's what it's all about. So if you're financially able and you'd like to invest in your job search, head on over to www.careerjump.com, all one word, /club. And you'll find the landing page and come and give it a go. We'll see you in there. Anyway, back to the pod.
Wanted to talk to you about the book as well. What was the kind of hypothesis behind that? And yeah, tell us a little bit more about the topics that you covered and why you wrote it.
So the hypothesis was that work was changing, that technology and globalization and demographics were coming together to fundamentally change the way that we worked. And a lot of it has been being somebody living overseas and having teams across Asia to manage, basically remote work, virtually managing these teams. And I felt like there were so many people that were in particular big markets or headquarters who were really not seeing that they needed to change their management styles. So that was one kind of aspect of like, guys, management is changing. Like with this whole globalization thing means that you have to really rethink how you get your teams to trust, how you get your teams to feel like they belong. And so that was sort of my corporate, angst maybe coming out, but I really felt like it was the future. Then technology has been my whole life. I mean, since the 90s, when I worked at Time Warner Electronic Publishing, we were doing CD-ROMs. And so that kind of forever technology changing has been my whole career. And you could see it happening, not just to the, companies that could afford to hire corporate innovation people, but to everybody. And then the last one was demographics. And that was really based on the people in my board director program, where a lot of the the innovation people in my at my level were talking about the future of work, and CEOs were talking about the future of work. But these folks who were at that level were starting to come to me and say, hey, you want to have a coffee, Diana? And this, I feel like work is changing, but like I'm 55 and the retirement age is 60. And I'm kind of thinking that I got another 20, 30 years of like, good stuff in me, but I don't have anything to do. And so a lot of them were looking at boards, but there was a fundamentally larger problem of the fact that maybe we're going to live 100-year life, but for sure like 70 or 80. And a lot of, in particular, European companies have retirement age of 55. And there really isn't that much for people to do. And the companies didn't have any idea how to deal with it. And that turned out to be a really big trend that really hasn't gotten much publicity as we focus on millennials. And that's what kind of inspired me to write, is in particular, these folks that kept asking me, oh, I've set my future of work up for the company, but what the hell am I going to do? And so I went out and interviewed, hundreds of people who seemed like they were doing things, who seemed like they kind of knew what they were doing. And between that and my research, I found that there were new future of work skills that people really needed to start thinking about.
And what kind of skills are we talking about?
So one of them was the experimentation mindset, the idea of an adaptability quotient, or AQ. And I wrote this book, and the pandemic has been kind of a crazy, intense, immersion for people in terms of a lot of these ideas. So I remember in February being on a podcast where we were talking about the world's largest work from home experiment in China, never knowing that it would be, the entire world in a short period of time. And a lot of that idea of experimentation is something that everybody did. I feel like prior to the pandemic, people were like, I can't do that. I'm so busy. I'm not going to, take a small step to experiment because I might want to do podcasts. So, people who want to write, who wouldn't even put a LinkedIn post up because they either want to write a book and it's this huge project, or they're not going to do anything. So that kind of thing, the corporate innovation mindset that I had, which is take a small bet, talk about where you think that's going to go, give it a time frame, and then reflect on what you learned from that, and then go on from there, was just not present. And a lot of the people who were thinking linear mindset, school, work my way up the hierarchy. And a lot of that experimentation also is outside of your corporate job often, or inside, either way. So that is a big one. Similarly, adjacencies, the idea of reinvention, the idea that you said you were an MD and then you thought about, oh, there's so many skills that you have in terms of managing people and managing disparate, pieces of the puzzle that you can bring to your current portfolio career. People who, for instance, are taxi drivers are now looking to become, in Singapore, urban drone pilots, because they've got that kind of map of the city thing going for them, and they understand how to get from A to B. But taxis are now becoming autonomous vehicles, so they have to think of their adjacencies. And then the other ones, besides experimentation and reinvention, were collaboration, because I think that we have to completely change the way that we collaborate, and then focus, that whole self-management. So a lot of things we discussed, in earlier parts of the podcast, but those are the 4 important ones.
Yeah, I love the reinvention bit. I can envisage that we will have 2 or 3 kind of careers in, as you say, with the life expectancy going up, the working age obviously going up in line with that, pension help going down in the UK and Europe as well. I guess it's totally feasible that we could see a world where people, train to be a doctor in their 50s, for example, and
absolutely, why not
go off in a completely different direction. And I think that's really exciting in many ways.
I think it's exciting. And if you try to cram everything into this small period, then of course you can't afford to take some time away. But when you see it expand, the thing I'm also excited about is the fact that you can fit more life in as well. So the idea that Steven Sagameister had of, taking his retirement from the end and splicing it every 7 years as a year off, I thought was brilliant. And the things that you can do are things like take more time out with your family, or, take this big trip that you might want to take. And I know that companies are also starting to think in that way as they look out and say, wow, if we give some flexibility to our people, they'll stick around for longer, they'll learn more, they'll be more engaged. And some of the things that they learn outside can be applied to what they're doing inside.
Love it. Getting the human back into human resources, we would say.
Yeah.
The sooner the better. The sooner the better. And and this move to kind of work-life integration rather than work-life balance, as it's been called for so long, I think is a positive thing. One thing that I think is really going to be tricky for organizations and leadership teams and boards is I feel like employees are wanting their work and their environment to be both more digital, but also more human at the same time. And I think that conflicting, well, I think they can be complementary, but it's a tough balance to get, whereby you're making things seem seamless and digital and you're using all the technology, but equally people feel like they're getting a tailored, personal, human-centric experience. I'd love to know your thoughts in terms of the future of work and this blend of technology and people and this mix, and what does good look like in amongst all of that?
Well, do you think that your own personal life is both more digital and more human now?
Definitely more digital, probably. Probably more human in the way that I think we're more honest with each other and more open with each other, particularly as 40-year-old guys who don't have a cultural history of being great at talking, communicating, being vulnerable, being more open. I feel like we've made, the types of discussions I would have with my friends now are totally different to how we might have spoke to each other 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I feel like society's getting more open and more human in that way, but I'm definitely communicating more digitally and not seeing as much of people as we would have done in the past, I reckon. So I'm not sure. What about you?
I do think that the reason the expectations are for us to be more digital and more human are because we've had so much of a leapfrog of that in our own lives. So if I think about even my own situation living in Hong Kong, and the first time I was able to do FaceTime on my phone with my dad, and him being like, oh my God, I can see you, and I'm like old enough that I remember, being an exchange student in France and doing the €1 or £1 every single time at the payphone. And it was so expensive. And now it's basically free video calls. So I think that kind of looking towards the past at how much different it is means that we have much more human connection, and that it is digitally enabled and can be more personalized. Maybe we're at a time when it's kind of shifted to too much digital, certainly after the pandemic. But I don't think that that's such a big ask at work. I think that we now have our own devices or devices at work, which was also, not that long ago, a crazy idea that you'd be able to bring your own devices into work. I remember when that was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And it is a cybersecurity risk, but we've managed. The human aspect is fascinating to me. I do think that we can connect now. I think we can connect digitally across countries and globally, which is exciting. And I don't know if you've had an experience during the pandemic, but in the last 2 years, I've had somebody who is one of the original gangsters from the Future Proof course. And he said, I can't wait until we can sit down and share a drink sometime. And I looked at him and I said, we've never met. Like that kind of like, I feel so close to you. How could we possibly have not met each other? So I do think that our expectations are changing. And I don't know about the human part, but a lot of the companies I work with are thinking about when is it important for somebody to be in the office? And the answer to that question is when we're together, when we can have some sense of belonging, when we can observe other people as part of our growth, and when we can co-create. And I think that's uniquely human.
And establish trust for sure. Although, like you, we've got 4 people that work in the business with us and we haven't met a single one of them.
There you go.
So, and I trust them all. I really do. And I feel like I know them all and I feel like I have a good relationship with them all. So yeah, it's super interesting. So do you buy into the expression, the new world of work, or do you feel like this is just an evolution? And so there is no new world of work?
I've probably used that phrase often enough that I should say, that I do buy into it. I've seen so much change in a short period of time that it feels new. And I talk a little bit in my book, Future Proof, about how even in the last 10 years, it's gone from, the stigma, for instance, in certain companies of taking maternity leave. And in Hong Kong, the statutory maternity leave was, I think, 8 weeks. And just in the last 10 years, it's gone from that. And I remember taking 6 weeks because I felt guilty that I did 8 weeks and my boss was coming into town. And now we're talking about, companies having globally 30 weeks of maternity and paternity. So I do believe that things are changing very quickly in the world of work. And I don't believe that there's some magical place called the new world of work that we're all rowing towards. And then we're going to get out and go, oh, this is where we were going. I think maybe the pace of change will slow down in some respects once we found a happy medium. For example, even for things like benefits, like, the maternity leave, like there is going to be some kind of happy medium where people start saying, you know what, I don't need 3 years off. Maybe that would be nice to be paid 3 years, but maybe 8 weeks is too little. And so you see that kind of settling out already. And now we are moving to, I did an interview yesterday for what day of the work should you be in your office? Like, what's the best day that you could be in your office? And I think that that'll settle out as people start thinking about, okay, when do I want to be in the office? How many days, which days, et cetera. And then we'll move on to the next thing that we need, because the demographics are changing, right? One of the things that I really believe is that as the unemployment rate and the labor market tightens, you will have more benefits for workers. And pre-pandemic, that was what was happening. And people who are older are actually being asked to work because they need people to be working. So it's all going to be, Future Proof was reinventing work in the age of acceleration. I think that the change will continue to happen, but not always in the same place. And that the change is what will be the new normal.
Yeah, I love it. It definitely feels more revolution than evolution at the moment. It feels that way. And I think that's exciting for everyone. I really do. I think it's really, really exciting for everyone. And we're also seeing people being asked to work longer domestically here as well, because in Europe, there's a huge aging workforce challenge, whereby we just know, even with, technology being able to pick up some of the slack, we just know that there's going to be a huge amount of retirements in the next 10 years. And there simply isn't enough people in the workforce coming through to meet the demand that will be required to drive growth, right? There's a significant deficit of, depending on which country, between 10 and 20% in most European countries. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how that all plays out, because companies and economies are still going to want to grow. But for them to grow, you need people and technology working more efficiently in the system, right?
Absolutely. And you see automation, filling in that gap in places like Japan. And even here, I talked to the CEO of the port, and this used to be one of the busiest ports in the world. And he would say, the average age of a forklift driver is 65 in our company. And it's super expensive to automate, but we can't hire people. So it's not like, should we automate? Should we not? We just have to do it in order to keep up with demand. And I think that is going to drive a lot of the automation, the new ways that people come into work. There's a huge amount of the labor force that could be part flexibly of work that is not, i.e., people who want to stay home and raise children but work part-time, people who are maybe neurodiverse, or people who just haven't had the access to jobs where they could excel, but don't have quite that link, don't have that smooth path to finding those jobs. And I have a huge excitement for, all the technology that's going into things to link people to jobs where they can excel, to link people to education, to upskill. And maybe it's a little bit optimistic, but I just think that whole realm is fascinating and has a lot of potential.
Love the positivity behind that. I knew it was going to be an awesome conversation, and it was. I could talk to you for hours. I think it's such a fascinating topic. But for anybody listening who wants to connect or follow you or get in touch or find the book, what do they need to do?
They can go to my website, which is Diana Wu David, DianaWuDavid. And if they want to start, we did a fantastic checklist, which is, are you ready for the future? And it's 11 questions. They're yes or no. You take this as self-assessment, and then you pick a few and you start and you're on your way. So they can find that at my website or at bit.ly/prepare for future.
Wow, that sounds like a really worthwhile exercise. So make sure you take Diana up on that offer. And thank you so much again on behalf of all the listeners. It's really been good to hear from you today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great chat.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Career Jump podcast with Andrew MacAskill. For more resources and information, just head over to the Career Jump website at www.execcareerjump.com to supercharge your job search and start making moves. Let's get to work.